games and suck. He'd rather have a buffalo take a diarrhea dump in his ear. He'd rather eat the rotten of a roadkill skunk and down it with beer. He's the angriest gamer you've ever heard. He's the angry Nintendo nerd. He's the angry Atari Sega nerd. He's the angry video game nerd.
Atari, ah yes, a name so dearly loved from the golden age of history. A magical time when there was no internet, no cell phones, just electronic video games. Okay, it was the dark ages, but life was simple. Atari was the prime innovator in video arcades, home computers, and home video game consoles. The Atari 2600 revolutionized the game industry. It made popular the use of changeable cartridges and plug-in controllers. The games were primitive and choppy, but back in those days, they were fascinating. But then there came competition. The Odyssey 2, Intellivision, ColecoVision, everybody was trying to take advantage of the video gaming craze. It wasn't like today where you have a choice of only 3 consoles. Back then, there were so many video game systems it made your head spin. Also, there wasn't any way to know which games were good and which games were bad, so consumers were alienated by an overblown market. So Atari made another console, the 5200. It replaced the TV game switch with an automatic switch box. It also tried to eliminate the use of wires by plugging the AC adapter directly into the switch box. But that only made it more confusing. The controllers had a pause button, which was new at the time, but the joysticks were faulty and unreliable. What it all came down to, the 5200 was an oversized piece of shit. I made a whole video about it, that's how much that sucks. Following the video game crash of 1983 and 84, Nintendo and Sega would rise from the ashes, once again revolutionizing the market and ushering in a new generation of gaming. Atari threw their hat in the ring again with the 7800. This one resolved all the issues with the 5200. The controller ports allowed you to use the same controllers as the 2600, and it was also backwards compatible with the 2600 games. The 7800 games featured better graphics, but didn't have much to offer in comparison with Nintendo. So, once again, it bit the dust. Afterwards, Atari stopped naming their consoles after numbers and instead started naming them after cats. The Atari Lynx was the first handheld console that was in color, but it found itself sandwiched between the more successful portable game systems, the Nintendo Game Boy and Sega Game Gear. Though the Lynx was pretty cool, gamers found it to be a little bulky, even with the Lynx 2, the new design model. The Lynx 1 took more batteries and drained them faster than the Game Boy. Also, it didn't have the same third-party support as the others, so it lost again. Meanwhile, Nintendo and Sega were in steady competition, but whether anyone preferred the NES library games or the Sega Genesis games was a matter of opinion. However, the debate amongst the fans and Sega's marketing campaign came down to one simple fact. The Genesis was 16-bit and the NES was only 8. This started a little trend I like to call the Bit Wars. Nobody ever talked about bits before that, and nobody ever talked about bits since. And what are bits anyway? Nobody knew, they're just bits. Try explaining that to your parents. Oh, I want a Super Nintendo for Christmas. Don't you already have a Nintendo? Yeah, but this one's 16-bit. What's that? I don't know. Other than it meaning the graphics were better, that's all we cared about. But the Bit Wars brought down our sense of gaming to numbers. People began to care more about the graphics and less about the actual gameplay. It was to the point that some consoles even used a number of bits in their name, like the TurboGrafx 16 and the Nintendo 64. But in 1993, one console would come along to remind us that bits aren't everything. It was the Atari Jaguar, and it was announced as the first 64-bit game system. We were like, damn, 64? That's like 4 times the bits. Even the official advertising slogan said, do the math. But beyond its vicious exterior and rotating Jaguar cube on the startup screen, it had little to offer. Gamers who were suckered in found a mediocre library of games and graphics that failed to impress. The controllers were huge and they had keypads, much like the ColecoVision and Intellivision. And like those, there were overlays which sometimes come in handy, but for most games, they're unnecessary. The cartridges don't have end labels, so I had to make my own. Seriously, is there any good reason not to have end labels? I guess instead to have these weird handles. What's the point? Do I really need that extra grip? None of the other top-loading consoles had that. It's like, oh god, I can't get the game out. Oh god, I need a handle. Man, I just can't get a grip. Gotta have a handle. And speaking of top-loading consoles, notice how they all have a door. That's to protect from dust. That's a good thing. But the Jaguar doesn't have that. Why not? But before I can review any games, we need to discuss the graphics. This is Zool 2. Now, without criticizing the game, it's a typical side-scroller, but look at it. The graphics don't look any better than Sonic the Hedgehog, and that was 16-bit. Maybe a bad choice of game, so let's give it the benefit of the doubt and try something else. Brutal Sports Football. Another okay game. Once again, the graphics aren't too impressive. Where'd the other 48 bits go? Let's try Checkered Flag. This showcases the graphic capabilities a little more, just the fact that it puts you into a three-dimensional environment. But compare it to F-Zero on Super Nintendo. 48 bits less, but a million times more appealing to the eye. Now look at Cybermorph. It's a flying game with polygon graphics. Going back to Super NES one more time, look at Star Fox. Are we missing something here? For a game console that claims to be 64-bit, it really doesn't show a whole lot of improvement. This caused a lot of debate amongst gamers whether or not it really was 64-bit. It's a topic that usually overshadows the Jaguar itself, but it's something that we just need to get out of the way. Well, we do know that Atari was originally planning a 32-bit system called the Panther, but decided to skip it and leap ahead. The Jaguar still used a 32-bit graphic processing unit, but through a combination of other processors somehow added up to 64. It's technical and confusing, but the point is the Jaguar was a rare species, not built like most game consoles. That made it harder for programmers to develop games on it, and as a result, many games didn't utilize its full capabilities, whatever they could have been. So I've given you a little history of Atari and how it tried to win the bit wars. Now that we got that out of the way, check in for part 2 and we'll actually play some Jaguar games. Or if you want to be cool, you say play some Jag! Check in for part 2 and we'll play some Jag! Alright, let's play some Jag. We've already established that the graphics weren't much of a leap for 64 bits, but graphics aren't everything. Take a look at Tempest 2000. It's an arcade-style game with a three-dimensional feel. It's really addicting and fun to play. Basically, you're in space with a bunch of 3D shapes, just shooting stuff and collecting power-ups. Funny to think that something so simple happens to be one of the best games the Jaguar has to offer. It even has some good kick-ass music. So kick-ass that there was actually a soundtrack on CD. But what's this monster on the cover? Does that ever happen in the game? Let's check out Alien vs. Predator. It's a first-person sort of survival horror thing. You can play as not only the alien and the predator, but as a marine. And with each character, your objectives are completely different. Surprisingly, it's most fun to play as the marine because you have a gun. But with the alien and predator, you have to sneak up on people. Not much to say, but it's another memorable game on the Jaguar. Next up, the big mother of first-person shooters, Doom. This is one of the best console ports of Doom that I've played. It comes as close to the PC version as it gets, but they had to ruin it with one thing. There's no music during the gameplay. Really? Was there any reason not to have music? Did they run out of time? Some might consider it scarier that way, but it would have been nice to have the option. I call this one Silent Doom, so just put on some Slayer and you're all set. So I think I covered most of the real famous Jaguar games, so now let's look at something more obscure. Attack of the Mutant Penguins. I gotta admit, the name alone got my attention. But what the hell's going on? From what I understand, there's a bunch of penguins walking around. They buy tickets and then go into a transformation booth where they become evil mutant penguins. And from there, they go to the Doom Scale. Yeah, the Doom Scale. They jump in the mouth and then appear on the scale. So you gotta stop the penguins by using a weapon, for example, a baseball bat. How do you get the bat? You gotta collect letters that spell the word bat. Where do you find the letters? Inside treasure chests. But how do you open the treasure chests? A key, right? No, gremlins. Yeah, you collect what they call gremlins, and supposedly you drop the gremlins inside the treasure chest and then it opens. But no, it doesn't open right away. It takes like 10 seconds. The more gremlins you use, the faster it opens. But it doesn't open, it like explodes. When you get the bat, you gotta kill all the penguins, but they don't die if you hit them. Instead, there's a bunch of power orbs that scatter all over. You gotta get all the power orbs to power up your bat so you can kill the penguins. But you only kill the penguins wearing hats because the ones that don't wear hats fight the ones that do wear hats. If the mutant penguins on the Doom Scale outweigh the regular penguins, the Doom Scale starts screaming and going ape. This is the weirdest game I've ever played. I mean, it's not bad if you're drunk or high or something, but how do they come up with this shit? I got it. I could come up with a game like this. How about you're a shark and you gotta shake palm trees till trains fall down, and you put the trains in an apple, and then turkeys come and eat the apples, and then the turkeys go up waterfalls, and to get them down, you have to collect monkey butts. So you drop the monkey butts on power lines, and then... Alright, what's next?
Kasumi Ninja.
A fighting game, and a really bad one. Most fighting games have a character select screen. In fact, all of them have that, right? Well, not this one. Instead, it's got this weird first-person sort of thing. You walk around and touch statues to pick your character. It's so awkward. How did they f*** up something as easy as the select screen?
Entering the combat zone.
Even worse, when playing the one-player mode, you only get a choice of playing as two characters. You have to beat the other characters to unlock them. That alone makes it more of a pain in the than it has to be. The game itself is pretty much a Mortal Kombat clone, with every hit making pools of blood fall down, and it even has death moves. But it's also one of those games that wimps out by censoring the violence. You have to put in a parental password just to turn the blood on. Basically, it's just a 6-digit code. But what's the chance of kids not figuring out the code before their parents do? But once it's unlocked, you still need to set the level of blood. So in case you want there to be a little bit of blood, but not too much, like who the f*** cares? Just turn the god blood on. The control is horrible. It's almost as bad as Shaq Fu. I'm not kidding. The attacks are sluggish, there's not much strategy, and you'll never guess how to do the special moves. You try everything, back forward kick, down forward punch, half circle back punch, you know, the typical stuff. But none of that works. So you gotta either maybe have the instruction manual or go on the internet to get the moves. You gotta hold the C button. Like instead of down forward C, you gotta hold C while you do it. Why couldn't it be something more common? I think one basic important thing in any fighting game is being able to pick it up and play. And the special moves are ridiculous. Like, what is this? He shoots fireballs at his or maybe it's a gaping flame. Who the knows? Somebody was not right in the head. This game is horrible. How do you wash down the bad taste of one game with another? Cybermorph. I already mentioned that this one looks worse than Star Fox, but let's give it a chance.
Good luck. Where did you learn to fly?
What's with this green face? It's disturbing.
Where did you learn to fly?
Stop talking to me.
Where did you learn to fly? Where did you learn to fly?
Every single time you hit something, it says that.
Where did you learn?
Knock it off. God, the mountains come out of nowhere. They just pop up, giving you no time to react. And when you die, it picks you up right where you left off. Sometimes I complain about games making you start back at the beginning, but this one literally puts you right back where you are. Imagine if in Super Mario Brothers you run into a Goomba and die. Okay, then what? Does it start you right in front of the Goomba again?
Where did you learn
That
to
voice
fly?
just never stops.
Where did you learn to
Shut
fly?
up.
Where did you learn to fly? Where did
Come on! That's enough of that.
Where did you learn to fly?
Oh, gotta get out of my head.
Where did you learn to fly? Where did you learn to fly? Where did you learn to fly?
Oh, I gotta get out of my head.
Where did you learn?
I gotta get out of my head.
Where did you learn to fly?
Stop!
Where did you learn to fly?
Oh, no.
Where did you learn to fly?
Where'd you learn to be an Jaguar? I've had all I can take. You're the most Did you just growl at me? Oh God! What do I do? Take this, kitty! Sick him! Yeah, that's the real Jaguar! Well, okay, we played a few Jaguar games. We played a sports game, a side-scroller, a first-person shooter, a fighting game, a racing game, and a flying game. We played some good games, some bad games, and overall, makes me want to puke. Like a cat. And then what do? They make a CD add-on. Yeah, the Jaguar CD. There's something about this that perplexes me. You have a game console that not many people owned, so you make an add-on that requires owning the game console. What were they thinking? It should have just been its own individual game system. Besides, the thing has its own AC adapter, so that's two. One for the Jaguar and one for the Jaguar CD. And that's some cool looking design. It looks just like a toilet. Yeah, it's a toilet. What a perfect analogy. I would review some games, but there's one problem. It doesn't work. Not even the cartridge slot, so I can't even play my regular Jaguar games while this thing's connected. I tried using different AC adapters, but nothing worked. It simply won't read the disc. So I sent this broken piece of to my friend Richard to see if he could fix it. He invented the Nintoaster, a fully functional NES made out of a toaster. He also made the Super Gen Atari, which plays NES, SNES, Genesis, and Atari 2600 games. So game mechanisms are his specialty. If he can't fix it, then it's Here's his diagnosis.
Yes, the Atari Jaguar CD. What a steaming pile of that was. I want to make sure there's nothing wrong with the console itself first, just to rule it out. So I plug in a game, push the power button, the Jaguar logo comes careening towards me in the foreground, and after a particularly hilarious startup sequence, I'm playing some Tempest 2000. Whoa! So now I know there's nothing wrong with the console itself. Time to move on to the CD unit. So I plug it in, hook up the additional 47 cables that came with it, push the power button, the logo comes careening towards me in the foreground, snarls, and the red screen of death indicating a connection problem. So, the first thing I did was deep clean every single contact point on both the console and the CD unit. I turned it on, red screen. Then I went back and made physical adjustments to every contact point in both the console and CD unit so it'd make a more solid connection. Turned it on, red screen. Finally, I just said it and directly wired those two sons of together, completely bypassing any and all cartridge ports and ruling out the remote chance of there ever being any kind of connection issue between the two systems. I turned it on and guess what? Red screen! So at this point I pretty much just gave up and shipped everything back to him along with a Pong machine, which pretty much just says, I'm sorry man, this thing is just too for me to work on. I think between the flaming you middle finger red screens and getting snarled at the same time, this machine has become self-aware and does not want to be repaired. That is my diagnosis. Richard out.
Well, thanks for trying. And thanks for the Pong console. Would you believe that a 30-year-old Pong console attached to a cell phone adapter would work, but a cutting-edge snarling Jaguar doesn't? There's something wrong here. And you know what? I blew $250 on this thing. So, you know what I did? Bought another one. Yeah. And guess what? It doesn't work either. So that's about $450 total I blew on 2 dead Jaguars. And these things are rare, so when the only 2 that I can manage to get my hands on just don't work, that leads me to believe that these things most definitely are self-aware. They don't want to work. You can't make them. They just refuse to be reviewed. And I've never had that happen. So, the end. I gotta take a